All right. Hello, hello. Thank you guys for joining us for this next session. So I'm Kate Beirowski. I'm the Director of Sales for WrenchWay, and I am beyond excited to be able to do this next session. I am sad to say that we are missing one of our panelists who came down with the flu, but don't worry. I think Brian and Matt will absolutely handle this well. I think we'll get everything kicked off and you guys will be able to learn a lot. So before I do that, I wanted to do a couple quick announcements. So do not forget to download the app. We are giving away the 255-piece tool set from Sonic Tools. And guys, did you guys see these stickers? We have all these stickers out there for you guys to be able to win those and score some. We'll mail them out. And then we're also doing the event giveaways at 2:20 today. So make sure you guys log in and sign up for that. So before I jump in to introduce our two panelists, our session is about employee recognition and engagement. So as we all know, recognition is a key driver for productivity and motivation for employees. But it's not that simple. In this roundtable, we're going to talk through why the employee recognition is so important and how do we implement this in a service center. I'm really excited to talk about this. We have two industry experts, Brian and Matt. So I'm going to let them pop on here and introduce themselves here. Brian, why don't you go ahead?
Sure, Kate. Thanks very much. Appreciate you. Too bad Sarah can't join us. That's too bad. I hope she's feeling better. But yeah, my name is Brian Hebert. I am a technical services and training manager with the Toyota Portland regional office. And I'm excited to cover this topic today.
Awesome. And then go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, hey everybody, thanks for having me. So I'm with Caliber Collision, senior manager for talent acquisition. Support the western half of the United States for the recruiting efforts and hiring. But we also have other lines of business that I also support too. Auto care, automotive glass, and mobile diagnostics. So happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes, absolutely. And Anna Strauss is the CEO of Spark. Like I had said before, she has come down with the flu bug. So we're all hoping she feels better, but I took some good notes when we were meeting before. So I'll try to put in her words of wisdom and kind of what we all talked about. So to kick us off though, I'm excited. I had Brian pegged for the first question. So Brian, sorry, you get to go first. But employee recognition, obviously, I'm extremely passionate about. It is so important for engagement, but we don't hear about it very often in the service world. And obviously, that's an issue. How do you think employee recognition is handled in most service centers?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I've been kind of thinking about this last couple days or this week leading up to this, just because how important this really is. I was really surprised on the last couple panels that you guys have had over the last couple of days. This has been a huge topic right from the get-go. I mean, the very first the discussion was like, I felt like it was kind of stealing the thunder, but the best thing was it was really hitting all the real high topics. So, I really think the most important thing to think about is employee recognition handled at most shops is probably not happening. And what we're seeing across the board is a lot of individuals that are trying to do some things that are kind of out of the box and drive to this idea of employee recognition. One of the things that I continue to always think about is how most shops are not recognizing their staff and really understanding what that recognition piece needs to be. We talked the other day about how one of the things that I think about is, employees don't necessarily leave their jobs. Oftentimes they leave the managers. And it really becomes an issue because that recognition for technicians in general just does not happen. And when we think about how most shops are trying to do that, and we compare it to other portions of our industry specifically that do a lot of recognition and drive to that, I don't think that many of our shops really have a good handle on how they could actually recognize and promote technicians to be able to you know, contribute to the organization and recognize their contributions that they're having to the business themselves. And so is recognition happening in most shops? I don't think so. I think the unfortunate thing is recognition is kind of an afterthought. It's something that comes kind of at the spur of the moment or shoot from the hip type deal. And I think that we really have to kind of start to focus in on that.
100%. I could not agree with you more. One of the things that stuck out to me even this morning when they were talking about is being a technician is a thankless job.
Yeah.
That sucks. I mean, let's just call it like it is. That's hard to hear, that you are expected to do your job but never get a thank you. And just with the younger generation and all of that, like that's hard to hear. So I guess, Matt, in what forms do you see recognition happening if you do see it in your shops?
Yeah, absolutely. And Brian, I couldn't agree with everything you said, even more, but, I think from just a recruiting standpoint, it's an opportunity for a key differentiator, right? It's a war for talent out there. So if not very many people in our industry are doing this, if we're able to implement this, it could be a huge upswing, for those service centers. But no, I'm really grateful to be part of a company that actually is doing a lot of this. It makes me really proud. So we have this is pretty basic, but we have caliber coins. So when you see somebody going above and beyond, living out our core values, you can recognize them with a coin. And while it's just a coin, it goes a really long way. People proudly just display these things. But I think one of the most important things to recognizing your teammates is knowing your teammates. Some people don't even like to be this, center of attention. So it could actually, do more harm than good. If you have one of those people on your team and you want to recognize them in front of their peers to make a huge impact. So it's so important to know your team first and find out what motivates them and everything before you dive into that, right?
Absolutely. I shared with you guys my story about recognizing someone and embarrassing them. And that was a bad leadership moment on my part, but it's getting to know your team, getting to know what do they want to be recognized for. And it doesn't have to be a lot. Like recognition could be your coin, which I mean, it is a coin, they can display it, but you're not handing out thousands of dollars and you're not doing a huge shout out and a trophy. It's saying, hey, you're doing a good job and thank you. And that goes a long way. And I think that is the simplicity of it that gets overlooked day in, day out. And again, that thankless job, that's hard. Like that's hard to have a positive attitude and a positive culture when you're not getting thanked. So I guess from the standpoint of, I'm going to go right into the money and ROI. What is your return on investment? Or I guess, why should an employer really sit down and think about doing an employee recognition program?
Yeah, I think we oftentimes think that we have to build those recognition programs that really drive a return on investment for each individual person. And we struggle sometimes to get technicians to really recognize what that recognition is and that component. And when you're talking to service managers or dealer principals or shop owners, a lot of times that ROI is really what is in it for them. We call it the WIFM. And the unfortunate part of that is oftentimes the return on investment is not immediate. And when they look at what that return on investment is, they're looking for something that, hey, what am I going to get out of this if I start recognizing individuals and people directly? And one of the things you mentioned, culture, that we really have to focus on is overcoming that cultural portion of shops or dealerships to where recognition is really just a form of being able to identify things that are positive that are going on in your business and in your environment. A lot of times we look at things, we talk a lot about the front end and the back end of shops and businesses. And for us at a dealership and OE level, the front end is the sales department. And it's amazing to me when we have a sales department that is recognizing individuals. And I used this example before where they might be selling one car today. And when they sell a car, the front end of the building is all they're like, let's go, and this is great, and they put it on a big board and they have a big celebration. But we don't really ever equate that to how that resonates on the service side. And so the service side doesn't have exactly the same level of, sales mentality to that. And the recognition is not as productive. And so, when is there anybody ever gone back to a technician and said, hey, great job selling a brake job? Or, hey, good job on making sure that the tires and the wheels are torqued on correctly, and recognizing them for those small things that happen. And the reality is we don't. So when they look at the return on investment that they have with that, a lot of times you have to set them down, and individuals have to sit themselves down and go, man, I'm not really doing this for the return on the investment. It's more the return on the investment of the technician. And that you're keeping individuals. I mean, we know that the cost of turnover is extremely high. And when we lose a technician, that's money that just floats out the door. And when we have to onboard them and bring them back onto the business, it's extremely important to remember that the recognition portion of it, although may not be specific to today, but in the long run, it really builds on that return on investment. And so it's a very simple act of just going out and identifying that, hey, you did a really good job. And that's from the top to the bottom. A lot of times the low end technician, who we call them, our maintenance individuals, who are actually seeing the majority of the customers that are coming in through the shop, are oftentimes not recognized for the significant contributions that they put into the business. But we always tend to think, well, the master technicians are the ones who need the recognition because they put in all this time. Well, the reality is it's everybody needs that recognition, and you have to point out those small things. And I think you nailed it on the head when you said it's your culture. It's the culture within the store and how you present that to each individual. So I would say that's the return on investment that you see in everything that we do.
Thank you. No, I think you answered that perfectly. There is no dollar and cents necessarily you're going to see on a piece of paper. It's the culture, the drive, Matt, I'm sure you can answer this, of like the best way to recruit someone is to re-recruit your own team. I mean, that's one less position you have to fill, and finding techs are very hard to find. We do it all day long, and it's very difficult. But I guess, what's your 2 cents on like the ROI and what we're doing with engaging with our technicians?
Yeah, ultimately, in my mind, it is culture as well, right? It's a huge driver or killer of culture in a shop. But there are dollars and cents tied to it as well, though, right? Because, in all industries, across the board, the average cost to hire is about $4,000, give or take the level of employment. But that can add up quick. That takes into account the recruiting time, payroll for the people that are interviewing, screening these candidates. It's a time-consuming thing to find the right people and onboard them correctly. It's also an expensive thing. And then you also have to look at, too, if you are missing a technician, how much is that in revenue that you're losing out on to a month? Is it $55,000 a month? I think is the average revenue for driving for a technician. So while culture is, I think, the biggest driver, to why we should be doing this and what we'll see from it, there are some dollars and cents that you can tie to it as well.
Awesome, thank you. So a recognition.
So can I add to that real quick here, Kate?
Yeah.
So the other thing that I would mention to that, and Matt kind of hit it too, is growing your own technicians and growing from within. And so, the recognition of technicians can often lead to making sure that you're growing those technicians along their career path. And that's really what I've started to try to talk to technicians about. Is the unfortunate part is most people came into the industry doing this as a hobby. And when they came into the hobby and then they realized it was a career, then they started it as a career, and they've never really seen themselves in that career path and that growth. And so, we have started a similar program. Matt, it's funny you have the coins. We've started a kind of a challenge program here as well, recognizing techs across the entire spectrum. And what it's doing is it's really trying to drive those technicians to understand that there is a significant investment that they've made in education of themselves to get to where they're at. And that career path really needs to drive those younger generations of individuals as well. And so even the recognition of just being a mentor to another individual or technician really needs to be celebrated in a lot of aspects, because they're sharing that knowledge with them and it's building onto that culture. You know, I'm going to use the example again of, I call them the grumpy techs, and I don't know if that's the right way to go about it, but it's the grumpy tech, right? You walk into a dealership or you walk into a shop and you know the guy. You can see him coming, you know, all the way across the shop. He's the grumpy tech. And what we've found is that we've started recognizing these individuals with, you know, a handshake, a congratulations, a thank you. You know, for us, it's a $7 challenge coin. And we're giving them a coin that really recognizes where they're at in their career growth. If they're an MDT and we talk about the 400 hours that they've put into investing in themselves to become an MDT, all of a sudden the grumpy tech is like, he's got this shiny new toy in front of him, and he's all about trying to share his experiences with everybody because somebody recognized what he's doing. And, you know, the negativity breeds negativity. And I talked a little bit about where the technicians go to even recognize themselves. And right now it's just technicians recognizing technicians. And that's the most unfortunate part about that, is that, you know, whether it's a grumpy tech who's been in the industry for 40 years, who now feels that he can make a contribution, or it's our newest techs, you know, that current generation of people that we need may not necessarily need that big recognition. They may just need something small, individual, to show that their contributions are being recognized. And so, you know, I love that point that you make, Matt, about how we grow those individuals along the way in their path. And then before you know it, everybody's recognizing everybody, and it's not hard to do. And, you know, you build a little bit of a program into it, and now people are happy and they're working together in unison, which then drives your ROI.
Yeah, exactly.
100%. No, go ahead, Mac.
I was just going to add that, you know, I think a lot of employers overthink it. It doesn't have to be some extravagant, you know, program. I hope they get to that point. You know, that's great. You know, we have all these award programs that we do for our technicians and our advisors. But, you know, even this, one of the simplest things we do is every Wednesday, each of our centers have a team engagement, right, where the general manager updates the center on progress for the week and WIP and everything. But a big part of that is shout outs. So each teammate has the opportunity to recognize each other. And that's not really that, almost anybody can implement that. You know, it's not that big of a deal, but it helps breed that culture, you know?
Absolutely. No, I love it. And you guys have, you've hit a couple things that I want to kind of go off of. And first of all, that something like that doesn't cost anything to sit there and just shout out someone. Or Brian, you said a handshake. Like, that is something simple, but seeing leadership, seeing management coming out and saying, hey, you're doing a good job, let me shake your hand, can go a lot further than what someone would expect. We don't need to give out huge prizes. It's just the simple respect factor. And I think that's the part that can be missing from this is, and between the sales selling a car and the fixed ops side selling a brake job, there is a difference. And just saying good job goes a lot further. You don't need to ring a bell. You don't need to do anything crazy. It's just the simple thank you. And I think that's overlooked. And when you look at implementing some type of program like this, it doesn't have to be an overhaul. By all means, it can be something very simple. If you guys, we have a lot of independent shops as well as dealerships watching. What is the first step, do you think, that needs to happen for someone to have like a successful recognition program? Matt, I'm going to go to you first.
Yeah, sure. Happy to. You know, I think it really starts with relationships. You know, some of the best rewards or ways to recognize teammates is something personal to them, you know, their family. So if you take the time to get to know your teammates, you know, on a personal level, right? What motivates them? What really motivates them? I recently had an opportunity similar to this where I have a teammate on my own team that's going above and beyond. And he's sounds funny, but he's big into sneakers, right? And so I was able to get a pair of sneakers that he's really had his eye on for a long time. And that went way farther than $1,000, you know, recognition bonus or whatever you want to call it, you know, because it's something that he, you know, it's personal to him. But I really think that's where it really starts, and just start doing it, you know.
Matt, I like shoes, just so you know. So if you
So does my
think
wife.
I am doing a fantastic job moderating this panel, just let me know and I can get you my shoe size. But no, you're right. I had to say something. I'm like, oh, I like this. But no, I think you're right on. You know your team, and that I can't say enough about. And I think, Brian, when we were meeting last week, just talking about this, you talked a lot about the understanding of your team and how to get to know your team and how to effectively motivate each person. It's different. How do you suggest leaders to know them on that level?
Yeah, you know, what I always try to say is just ask them. I mean, a lot of times if you are trying to create a program or you're trying to do something different within your shop and it's going to impact individuals and people, what would be the problem with just asking them what their thoughts are and how they might implement something? It's one of those things where you look at, you'll ask somebody and most of the time you're going to get answers that you'd never even thought about. You know, we think recognition now, I was just mentioning, you know, it's not money. Go figure. A lot of times money is like the 8th or 9th thing on the list. You know, it can be really simple things. Like you might ask them and they say, hey, you know what, we might just want the microwave in the break room fixed. Or could it be something where I could just get some soap to be able to wash my hands before I go home? And a lot of times I think we overlook those things as, you know, those are also recognition pieces too. If you can make their work environment better and they have suggestions on what you could do to recognize their contributions, it's not always money. And then I think we also have to be honest with ourselves too, once we start to do a recognition program, that we may feel like there's a recognition piece in this, but it's really more of a recognition piece that we feel like we want. And so you have to be honest with yourself and make sure that you're in fact recognizing the technician with what they're with the way they want to be recognized, and that, you know, that polarization between one technician who is in a different generation might be completely opposite from what another technician needs from a recognition standpoint. So we think, you know, of current today, millennials, Gen X, Gen Z, whatever generation we want to talk about, they want something different than a legacy technician wants. And they've grown up differently. So you can't really do a one size fits all. You try, but you can't really say, you know, like the coin is a great way, but the way you implement the coin into your shop is the important portion. So that when they're using the coin or they're using a tool as a recognition point, that they can actually understand why they're being recognized. And, you know, not all the millennials and the Gen Zers want the trophy. They just really want a pat on the back and say, hey, good job, and acknowledge that they're actually doing the right thing. And then the biggest key, I think, when you look at that is you got to follow up. We oftentimes start things, particularly in the service side of the business, where our intentions are great. We run this program, we build this whole thing, everybody's happy, the morale's up, and then we all get busy and we forget that was what it was, and it gets pushed to the bottom of the to-do list. Sometimes it falls off the to-do list. You know, things get tight, budget gets cut. All of a sudden we can't support, you know, running the program that we were trying to run before. And I would argue that some of those programs are more important than some of the other cuts that you might make. And so, you know, the key to that is the follow-up and making sure that the technician that you're recognizing, it doesn't go unnoticed, and that there's actually a perpetuation of the recognition.
Absolutely. No, thank you for that. And I think that is 100%. Wow, can't talk. Spot on, but it is so important. And it's the follow-up. It's not the flavor of the week. We all hear that phrase all the time, is it's being it's being consistent with it and not depending on your mood and what is going on in the shop. It's consistently telling your team they are doing a good job. We did have a question on the Q&A. I'm going to just ask you guys it right away because I thought it was good with this, or good with what we're kind of talking through right now. But any advice on ways to identify how someone wants to be recognized? I know, Brian, you said you just straight up asked them, how do you want to be recognized? But Matt, what about you? What are your thoughts on that question?
No, it's a really good question. And, other than just asking, something else that I've had success with is, since we have teammates all across the country, it's especially during COVID, it's kind of hard to get to know teammates, virtually. You can do a quick survey. They're free. Google, you can make a Google form and have fun with it. Like, what are their favorite beverages? What do they like to eat? What's their favorite meal? If you had a weekend free, what would you do? How would you spend your time? Just ask those questions. It's free, it's easy. And that's another way I've had success with getting to know my teammates and getting to know like what really motivates them. So that, to add that personal touch.
Absolutely.
And I would say along those same lines, just to Matt's point, is just get to know them. I have a field team that I manage, and these guys are talking to these technicians all the time. And you'll learn that, one guy might want to be recognized by getting a certain type of drink or a soda, or I'd give a really good example, but the language would not be very great about what this is. But I'm going to use the word. So I had a technician who had, he called it a give a care cup. And so I changed it a little bit there, but it was a give a care cup. And every time that somebody gave a care, he would put a quarter into the cup. And so you'd walk around to him and you'd say, hey, what's going on? You'd start talking to him. He says, I don't know. He'd pull the cup up and say, the cup's empty. I don't give a care. And so what we started doing is all of our field staff, every time we'd go in there, we'd go in and talk to him, and we'd drop a quarter in the cup. And so next time we would go in there, there was always a quarter or whatever happened to be in the cup so that he would at least give a care. And the reality is he was just trying to get us to recognize that he wanted recognition. And it was through this cup, right? But nobody was recognizing him, and it was his subtle way of saying that. And so I love that, Matt. Like, do a survey. Maybe it's a bang drink that everybody loves in the shop, or it doesn't have to be rocket science. And so I encourage individuals to do those kind of outside the box things.
Well, Mark and Jay, I'm sure are listening, and they know that I used to love Bang energy drinks, and I've had to stop drinking them for the last 3 months. My husband bet me I couldn't, but that would motivate me, and I'm sure they would bribe me with one of those to do something. So just getting to know your team is absolutely huge, and knowing what's going to motivate them. And just for the panelists that asked, or the attendee that asked the question, it can be something simple. And White Claw, Sarah said on there, I know White Claw does motivate me as well, but just it can be something simple. And you guys haven't brought it up yet, so I know I'm going to, because I do get to meet with a lot of service managers and getting to talk with them about what they're doing for their teams. And I have seen some great goals set and hit and exceeded, and they're out doing steak cookouts and doing things like that. That can be huge. And yes, steak can be costly, especially because of COVID, but doing things like that, bringing the team together, that also brings together that culture factor of having them all sit down, leave an hour or two earlier so they can do that, but getting that quality time to sit down, especially from the leadership perspective, getting to know your technicians at that level is absolutely huge. They're thankful for the fun. Maybe you buy them some Trulies and White Claws, I see them commenting about, or some, I'm in Wisconsin, some Miller Lite or something, but let them enjoy themselves and getting to know them. I think that's a great way to just get to that personal level and take away the barriers from a leadership perspective to the technician, that you're not above them. It's very much like you are proud of the work they're doing. Let me do something nice for you. So you guys haven't brought it up yet, so I can't wait any longer. So I'll talk through that. But also, I want to talk through, do you guys have any success stories and about how recognition and the ROI was like their motivation and you got more work productivity out of them? Do either of you have any good success stories? And that was not a question we had talked about previously. So I'm sorry for putting you on the spot, but I think you guys probably have something up your sleeve.
Actually, when you're talking about the drink thing, it brought back a quick story from when I was in sales. It has nothing to do with like teams and everything, but I had this customer that loved Pepsi. And so I brought him a Pepsi one time and he said, I better see one of these every time you come see me. And so I made a point to do that, which just made this internal, joke. It was an inside joke, between me and that guy. And gosh, his sales went through the roof because that relationship was built, there. I know that's sales, not productivity, but kind of laughed in my head when I heard you mention drinks, earlier. So,
but a lot of this is sales. Recruitment is sales.
Yeah.
It's selling to them. You want them to feel cared about or wanted. I know my team here, I buy them Reese's peanut butter cups. They love them, as well as like gummy worms. Like that is their thing, but it's building that relationship with them. And I've been able to learn it. And they work so hard and they deserve it. And it's just almost like a thank you, or even Starbucks. So Brian, how about you? Any good stories that you've had up your sleeve?
Yeah, so I got a lot of good stories up my sleeve, but I will use one that's a pretty good example. And so Toyota, one of our pillars of our company is respect for people. And we really focus on making sure that we can respect every individual. So recently I had a great opportunity of being able to converse with a technician who is a long-standing technician and has recently probably been driven away from the industry a little bit. COVID has definitely put a lot of people in a lot of different places, and he really wanted to be heard. He had COVID. He was still struggling a little bit with that. He's had some health issues over the course of his life, but we had a great opportunity to really sit down and talk. And so this particular dealership, the whole dealership was really in a negative place right now. And the question really was, why is everybody in a negative place? And well, the dealership's doing good motivation. We feel like things are going well, but everybody's really down in the doldrums because we don't think we're being heard. And so we said, okay, well, what aren't you being heard about? Well, we're trying to do this and we're trying to do that. So we made a little pact with them. We said, hey, if you guys do these things, we'll do something for you. And we talked to the dealer principal. The dealer principal was on board. We got everybody together, and lo and behold, they hit all their so we have what's called skill level guidelines. They have to hit a guideline of all their skills with their technicians. And not one of them had taken any of those guidelines, as well as ASEs. And the whole shop decided that this one, you mentioned steak lunch, right, was going to be, but it had to be burned. The steak had to be burned by the dealer principal. And so the thing is the dealer principal had been remiss in the fact that he wasn't coming down and talking to those guys like he had done prior to COVID. And that was the whole negative aspect of what was going on in the dealership, is nobody had seen him in like 24 months. And the real story was because his mother is elderly, has had many health problems, and he's worried about getting exposure with everybody that they're seeing in the back. But the reality was he hadn't placed the effort into being able to make sure that everybody was there. So we made this pact to him. They all agreed, and he showed up, and he cooked the steaks for everybody. And it was like this big, huge family reunion all of a sudden of people coming back together. Again, COVID it treats everybody differently, and you just don't even know until you really put in that respect for every individual on what's going on. And they were all feeling like they were just being technicians, right? They were in the back of the store turning hours, and he was probably out, doing whatever dealer principals do. And he thought that everybody back there was happy because they understood why he wasn't being part of it. And it was just a real big misunderstanding. And so if everybody just has that respect for what's going on, and then subsequently, you asked what the return on was. That is that they had their best ever in October.
Oh,
And the dealership drove them. They said, hey, we're going to do this more often. I'm sorry I wasn't there, but it turned out to be their best ever October. And right now they're on their best ever November, and they're recruiting people. And it's the word of mouth. The slide before we started here was your WrenchWay app, and the discussion about how it's all anonymous. And, you know, how cool would that be if you were that store that the culture was so great that people were wanting to come and see you and be what it is, and you were getting, you know, requests from technicians who are in really bad cultures that really meet the need that you have. And so, you know, it cannot be understated how important the dealer culture is or the shop culture is where you're at to bring in the right people that fill the need that you have, that ultimately lead to your best evers, and just have that respect for those individuals. So hopefully that filled what you were looking for, but it's amazing to see, because we walked in there in September, and what should have been a really vibrant technician base was really just a bunch of negativity. And it just took us about, you know, maybe an hour to really get down to the bottom of what it was and really have some conversations. And here they are having their best ever October, which has been their best shop production over the last 16 months.
No, that's great. No, that was a perfect story. And it's nice you were able to figure it out that quickly. I know that doesn't happen a lot of the times, but this actually leads right perfect into the question I have for Matt is, how can an employee recognition program support recruiting? Because those two literally go hand in hand. And I know Matt has a lot of good questions or good answers for us on how they go hand in hand together.
Yeah, it definitely hand in hand. So I'll say this, no matter what company I've recruited for over the years in the auto industry, there are always a handful of general managers or hiring managers that I never heard from because they never lost anybody. And then there's a handful that I heard from just about every month because they couldn't keep anybody. And it was almost always because of the culture in the shop, right? And that comes directly from, you know, recognizing their teammates, you know, and everything like that. So yeah, turnover, definitely. And, you know, in the same breath, birds of a feather, right? People want to work with people they're like. And so if you attract the right talent, they all have friends. When you hire somebody that's a referral, the statistic out there is that they're 80% more likely to be retained for at least 3 years. That's huge, especially in our industry, right? And you were asking for a couple stories, you know, or success stories previously. I have a couple actually, and ironically, they both involve onesies. But so
I'm curious now.
Yeah.
Please go on.
So years ago, we're going into a new city. We didn't have a shop in that city yet, right? The top candidate for the manager position that I really wanted to hire, I found out in the hiring process or in the interview that he was expecting his first child, and he was just really excited, right? So I had a custom made onesie with our logo on it. And man, that just went above and beyond with not only him, but his wife. You know, it looped in the whole family. That guy is still with that company today, and that was probably 7 years ago. One of the top performers, and it was actually a rocky hire because we found out later, after we already extended an offer, that he actually had a non-compete. And so if we didn't have that relationship already, you know, formed by that simple little onesie, you know, I don't know if that would have ever panned out. And again, he's a top performer in that company now. And then another one's a very similar story, but with a technician, again, going to a new city, nobody knew who we were. So it was hard enough just to attract the talent, but that person is still with us today too.
That's awesome. And just like showing that you care, and it's the care factor for the technicians, knowing that you're there to support them and just imagine your first interaction yesterday was talking about how to onboard an employee. Well, just think of that from a hiring standpoint. You already care. They're having a baby. You're supporting them through that. That's their first interaction with your company, and they're still there. That goes into retention and just going above and beyond. So yes, that can be part of our discussion, but it goes into everything. It all flows together, and that makes your job easier to recruit. And I think of it as, if your culture is good, you you naturally attract people that want to be a part of that. And that's, I mean, a huge thing we talk about at WrenchWay all day, every day is you need to brag about your culture. You need to show them why you want to be a part of it. And trust me, the talent will come, and you can't be so darn humble about it. I tell all the shop managers that I'm like, you've created something special. Stop being so humble, brag about it and show, because technicians want to be a part of that. Because we all know there are shops out there that are not recognizing them for that.
Yeah.
So,
and I would also say too, you know, when you do have somebody that you're interviewing or you're recruiting, let your people help you recruit them too. Because if they're happy and the culture's correct in the back shop, and you turn them loose to go and interview, you know, use a technician that you have that you know will be able to understand whether the person you're interviewing or recruiting is capable of doing the job, but also that individual will see what the culture is like in the shop, and they'll want to come and work for you. And, you know, that goes back to being honest with yourself. If you're a manager of a program, or you're a manager of a dealership or a service center, and you don't feel like the culture is actually what you want, then you would probably be worried with sending somebody back to say, hey, we're thinking of hiring this guy. And they'll, you know, you'll in turn be able to not only draw people, because the word of mouth will start to spread, but you'll also retain those people much better because they know what they're getting themselves into.
yes, absolutely. My next question is going to change it a little bit. So we're talking about not recognizing enough. Is it possible to over recognize your team and just go over the top? Either one of you can take that one. I see the wheels are spinning.
Yeah, you know, I really think you can. I think it'd be hard to do, but you could devalue it, right? If you recognize everybody for every little thing, you know, but in the same breath, we're definitely not doing enough of it. So it would be a challenge to pull that off, I think.
Yeah, I think that's what I was going to say too, is I'm not sure that we've got to the point yet where we've started over recognizing people. I guess if it's disingenuous when you're doing it, that might be something that would turn people off from it. And I think if your history is not following up, they're going to feel like, well, this must be the flavor of the month now. We're going to do this month, and then what are we going to have next month? So I really do think you have to go both feet in and commit to what you're doing when you're going to try and do, you know, again, the recognition doesn't have to be big. It just has to be sustainable. And so if they can sustain what they're doing and making sure that people understand that, then I think that would be the only time that I could think of right now where we're over recognizing. But I agree with you.
That's where my mind,
we're doing
that's
it,
where
yeah.
my mind went to, of it just not being genuine, of just saying like good job and not meaning it. Like there has to be some you have to be genuine about it. And that's what I was thinking too. But also it doesn't mean as much. So no, thank you guys. And that's a tough one to answer, but I can see how some people can go swing the pendulum too much too fast. So we did get another question on the Q&A that I was going to ask right away, is how can you gauge if you're doing a good job with employee recognition or if you need to improve on it?
I mean, I think just gauging the overall morale, but you know, I try to have one-on-ones with everybody on my team, you know, so they have an open forum to provide feedback. And I think that can be a great way to kind of test the water too, you know. I don't know, Brian, what do you got?
No, I mean, I was just going to say that too. I mean, you really need to have some kind of open door kind of policy, right? And I think one-on-ones are a great way to go with that. Again, one-on-ones are a slippery slope too, because if you do one-on-one with one person and you're not doing it one-on-one with another person, the impression is that you're trying to take care of something. Yeah. And so I think you really have to commit to that. One thing that comes to mind to me is I think you might feel like you've made it if you're being recognized by the individuals who you're recognizing. And so simple things like when you're in an environment where as a manager you can get kudos from your own team, at least you feel like that they're in a safe enough environment to be able to make those kudos without them being not genuine. But I think, just to your point, Matt, is when your environment starts to grow everything and the morale is up, that's when you feel like, at least that's when I feel like I've made a difference, is that at least people are wanting to come to work, and I don't feel like they're leaving me. They're actually coming to the job because they're happy to be there.
Mhm.
And sometimes technicians, they're hanging around too much because they're having too much fun. And so sometimes you really have to tell people, hey, go home. You have a family too. And this, we spend, I spend way more time with my work family than I do with my normal family most of the time. And so we enjoy getting together and being part of each other, but sometimes you also have to say, hey, you need to go home and do that. So if you've got people that are just hanging around because it's so great that they want to hang around, I think you've made it.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yep.
I like that. And another thing I was going to just add to it is like understanding your turnover numbers, doing your exit interviews. That's a good way to know. And you can ask those questions. Obviously, we don't want turnover in the industry. We want to keep it, but we're going to run into it. It's the nature of the beast, but being able to be upfront with the employees that are leaving, you can get a lot of valuable information. Sometimes you have to take it with a grain of salt if it is someone that is frustrated leaving your company, but I think it's good feedback and always being open to that feedback on your recognition programs.
Yeah, and I would say if Anna was here, that's where she would have gone really into that. And if there's one thing I can say with regards to Anna, is that there is a great podcast that Jay did with Anna that really highlights a lot of those key indicators that she's definitely uniquely qualified to help us with that as well. But that podcast that she did as well, I would, if nobody's heard that one yet, I would encourage you to go back and listen to the one with Jay and Anna as well, because it's a phenomenal piece of podcast.
I paid him to say that just so everybody knows.
Yeah, the check's in the mail. Thanks.
It is a fantastic podcast, and I would absolutely recommend. Sarah looks like she's grabbing the link right now for everyone, but Anna can talk volumes to this, and just looking at the numbers, the data, and understanding where your team's at. And that's what she does, and she's fantastic at it. And the next question I'm going to ask, and you guys, we need to do Anna some justice here, is about the generational trends. And that is a challenging one. And Anna had the best answer for it, of course. But I think that that's a question that comes up quite a bit, is every generation wants a different way to be recognized. And yes, true, but what, I guess, any experience from that standpoint, from how to recognize people of different generations? I know I have an example, but I'll wait to share it. But Matt or Brian, do either of you guys have anything off the top of your head to kind of meet the needs of each generation?
Maybe Bitcoin for Gen Z.
Well, my go-to is really just trying to find out what they want.
Yeah.
And it is a tough deal, and especially in our dealerships, there is such a cultural difference between everybody that you work with. You get one guy who is, he is the gearhead. He knows everything about everything, and technicians are that way. And then you also have a technician in the exact same shop who, when he clocks off, he's not talking about a car for anything. You couldn't pull out what his favorite car is if you asked him. And so I think you have to really just know your people. And I don't really have a good example for you, because I think we struggle with it, honestly. I think we struggle with trying to figure out how to recognize each one. And that's why I say you can't, it's hard to make just a standard recognition program that resonates with everybody if you don't tailor it to how you're going to recognize each individual person. So the overall program, or whatever you're going to do recognition wise, is a great lead into how you're going to recognize those individuals. But and it's
See,
a
Brian,
tough one.
I want to steal your answer that you gave us last time we chatted about this.
Okay,
And
I
then
don't remember.
So one thing you had brought up is that the younger generation coming in is more motivated by days off.
Oh yeah.
And
Yep.
that is true. They want more of that balance of life, of being able to take personal time off, not feel bad about leaving the shop, where an older generation is much more, they want to work and then be recognized in front of a group or compensated for it. So there's definitely those different generations. And it's funny, that idea did come from you. I stole it from you last time we spoke, but I think it's something worth calling out is it doesn't always have to be something monetary. It doesn't always have to be like that thank you, but people, some generations really do want to spend time outside of work, not necessarily fixing a car, but enjoying a day off. And I mean, that's something, when you get busy with life, I get motivated by stuff like that, because sometimes you do feel bad trying to balance both. And it's a good motivator for some people, or leaving early on a Friday. It doesn't have to be something huge, but that'll get their butts moving, I swear.
Well, yeah, and I go back to it again. I mean, we always think of recognition can only be in the dollar, in the money and the monetary function. And so that, to my point earlier, is you're going to find that whether you survey them or you talk to them or whatever it is generally not money. I mean, it's just and that's a great point. I'm glad you reminded me, Kate, because there is a lot of times where, again, you'll just, and I don't know necessarily if it's generational either. I mean, It really just depends on what the individual needs at that time. You might go to somebody who really just needs some time off because of whatever, and they don't have the time off, and maybe that's just something that you do. Again, it's not really built into a program per se, but you just got to know what makes people tick.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So, I use generational, information for certain areas, in business, but I think recognition is one that it would be tough. Right. I think to Brian's point, it's more about getting to know each individual teammate and finding out what motivates that person.
Perfect. No, thank you guys. And I know Anna had some insight on there, but it is on the podcast. So I know I saw that they shared the link. Absolutely listen to it. I've listened to it twice. And it is a fantastic episode for the Beyond the Wrench podcast. So I do have another question about leadership in executing a good recognition program. What are your thoughts about gaining buy-in from an upper leadership to successfully execute a program?
Yeah, a lot of times when I'm working with senior leaders in operations, it's all about getting their buy-in, and it's about tying it to ROI somehow. So if you can tie it to retention, to motivation, production, that always seems to help for me anyway.
Yeah, and what I try to do is not only with that. I mean, obviously that is a huge component to that when you're trying to kind of manage up, but I try to get them involved. And so if they can see the component to what they're doing, or if I'm looking to try to do something, I try to get them to have a piece of the pie, try to get them to remember where they came from, what they liked to have as recognition, and why it's important that we recognize individuals. And so if you can utilize that executive presence within what you're doing, whether it's in the recognition program or it's getting buy-off to be able to support a recognition program, I think they have to be involved. And if you go back to my example with the steak at the one dealership, the reality is the guy that needed to be there was the dealer principal who's signing the paychecks every week. And it would not have been as impactful had he not been the one that was there, because now they all feel like it's a cultural change, or it's a cultural thing to be recognized. And so that presence of them and the executives being there, whether it's a corporate environment, whether it's a dealership environment, whether it's even just in a team meeting, you got to have those MDTs and those, quote unquote captains of your team to be able to make sure that they're putting out the small little fires of naysayers that might be running around. And one other thing that I would be remiss to say is you gotta, when you're talking about your people, we talk about male and female, there's differences in ways that recognition can happen for males versus females. And so you really need to understand who you're working with and get them involved in making those decisions too, because, when we're recruiting, we're trying to recruit the best, and we don't ever really know what those individuals are going to be when they come across our table. But I think we always lump, unfortunately, technicians as just male, and we don't really focus on how that impacts a female technician as well. So
Yeah, and I'll say also, if you take the time to do that, Brian, get to know your team, find out what really motivates them. These conversations with leadership can sometimes be easier, because the things that truly motivate that person might be less than the dollar amount that you were approved to spend on a bonus or recognition that way. So just a quick story. I know we're running out of time. There was a teammate that loves snowboarding. His whole family would go skiing every year. His current employer didn't allow weekends off, so he hasn't been able to do it for years, right? And so instead of a sign-on bonus or anything like that to get this guy on board and retain him, we actually, I looked into the ski resort that him and his family enjoyed going to, and the ski pass was only $600 annually for a family pass, right? So that's $400 to $500 less than what we're probably going to pay for a sign-on bonus. So that conversation was pretty darn easy, and it retained him too, because we took the time to find out what really would motivate him and his family.
That's awesome. So you are right. We are running low on time, but we did just get one more question into the Q&A. So I'm going to go ahead and read it. And if one of you guys want to answer it, it's a little bit longer, so just bear with me. In a technician's eyes, is it possible that we can give bad recognition? All shop managers know who their top performers are, and to techs, unfortunately, what they get for doing a great job is simply more complicated jobs to do.
Yeah, so I agree. We oftentimes give the complicated jobs to the guys who are the most experienced and do what they do. And what I would say to that point is that is a great opportunity for mentorship and being able to use a technician who is capable of mentoring. Now, the thing you really have to think about when you look at these is sometimes that technician who's got all the experience in the world is not a great mentor. And so if you can recognize those individuals that are able to mentor those lower level technicians and highlight their contribution to what is going on, even though they're getting the complicated or the shitty job or whatever it happens to be, the recognition is that they're the guy that we've chosen to do that, and we couldn't do this without you, kind of thing. That goes a lot further than just, hey, you're the most senior guy here, and so we're going to give you the complicated job and good luck. Call me when you're done, which is often how it happens. But if we can help them to recognize that they are truly the top of what our shop is, and I would say, here's an opportunity for us to say that monetary might cover some of that, giving them a little bit of extra pay because they are doing the complicated work to make sure that they got a quality job that's rolling out the door. I mean, I find that value added when we're spending a little bit of extra money, but it is a tough one, and being able to do that. But I think if you can get them to recognize that they're contributing through mentorship, or the fact that they are being handed the crappy job, I think that's the best way to recognize an individual and just acknowledge to them that what you've just handed them.
Perfect.
I go back real quick just on the first one, the first not podcast, but the first roundtable that we had, and the technicians who feel like they don't contribute at all, I think is a huge thing for us to really focus on. And that is, everybody who's talked about it is 100% right, is that the industry technicians have always kind of been kind of last on the docket. And this idea of flat rate and salary pay is a huge issue that can be handled through some recognition, and being able to make sure that when they do have a flat rate job that maybe doesn't pay exactly the way it should, we recognize them for their contributions. And then as we work through that, if we can get to a salary point where they're at, and then bringing them into the fold of the conversation and their business, Jay had mentioned, you know, if they knew what the X's and the O's were of the business, they might understand exactly what was up against, what they were up against. And that recognition to identify that they are a contributing portion to the return on the investment at the store or the shop is a huge portion of that. And, you know, hopefully technicians feel that, and they're feeling that there are people out there that are advocating for them. And, you know, I can't thank WrenchWay enough, and everybody else who is driving to this component to just try to help technicians out.
Thank you. And you answered that beautifully. So thank you for adding that in. And you kind of brought us full circle of that is why we're all here. We're here to make the technicians' lives better, their jobs better, and recognizing them for the work that they're doing. And I get to talk to some amazing people every single day. I know there are good places to work out there, and we just need help playing the matchmaker game and finding them the right place for them to work and to thrive at. And it's amazing. So thank you guys very, very much for joining this roundtable. It was absolutely fun. We missed Anna, but definitely go back and watch that podcast. She has a lot of insight on the employee recognition portion for the service center. So please make sure you guys check that out. But also, I do want to let you guys know that we have prizes coming up. So that is the most important thing, right? Is being able to win the Snap-on tool or the Sonic Tools tool chest, and then being able to sign up to win these awesome stickers. So make sure you guys check those out. We appreciate you guys watching live with us and anybody watching the replay, and we will be back very soon. Bye, everyone.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Skate.